If someone were to ask you what is Baltimore's oldest public institution, what would be your guess? The University of Maryland School of Medicine? The mayor's office? Well, as it turns out, the square that I'm standing in and the building right over my shoulder predate them both. I'm your host, Evan, and today we're going to take a deep dive into the fascinating history of Baltimore's Broadway Market. Baltimore's public markets go back to a time shortly after the American Revolution, making it the oldest continuously operating market system in the entire United States. Over their 200-year history, these respected centers of commerce have undergone dramatic changes, enduring everything from financial hardship to gentrification and even fires. Today, the markets are undergoing another period of transformation. Lexington, Broadway, Hollins, and Cross Street have all received extensive renovations over the last several years, totaling in the tens of millions of dollars. But why is the city investing so much money into seemingly outdated commercial institutions? Well, it's due to one simple fact. Baltimore's markets aren't solely about shopping. They're symbols of our shared history and even now remain centerpieces of community life. This is demonstrated best by Broadway Market. The most recent renovations here are not only the result of a concerted public effort spanning decades, but represent the culmination of two family stories 100 years in the making. But to understand these stories, we first need to understand where the markets began. Following the end of the Revolutionary War, Baltimore experienced an economic boom, drawing new residents from across the just-formed United States. In 1784, in response to growing demand by citizens, the city approved the construction of 3 markets, including the Fells Point Market. Later named Broadway Market, this energetic commercial core was the primary source for fresh foods for the neighborhood residents. Equipped with stalls, barns, and weighing platforms, everything from beef to fish to coffee and tobacco could be found here. Yet, more than a simple place to fetch groceries, Broadway Market functioned as the beating heart of Fells Point. It was a common meeting place where residents could share news, debate the day's issues, and even catch live street performances. When a new brick structure was constructed in 1864 to replace the North Shed, it was built with a second story that served as the role of civic center, providing a dedicated space where people could meet and build a sense of community. As immigration to the United States spiked in the 19th century, Baltimore became a major point of entry into the U.S. akin to New York or San Francisco. This was especially true for Fells Point, whose docks welcomed tens of thousands of immigrants from across Europe every year. Many of these new arrivals took their first steps on American soil, walking up South Broadway, where they would have seen a bustling market alive with activity. Thanks to the docks, numerous local shipyards, factories, and warehouses, jobs were readily available in Fells Point. This meant many immigrants could choose to stay in the area to live and work. Each immigrant community had its role to play at the market, and often would specialize in selling a specific ware or food. Germans were typically meat cutters. The Irish frequently sold fish and chicken, while Italians provided the produce. Further adding to the eclectic flavor of this melting pot were visitors from elsewhere in the city, enticed not only by Broadway itself, but by a bounty of new restaurants, taverns, and hotels opening in the area. The market's success was the community's success, and its influence radiated out into the surrounding streets. This trend lasted well into the 20th century, even as World War I stemmed the flow of immigration into the city. Yet, many recent arrivals still managed to find their way to Baltimore, including one Greek baker who started his own bakery in the basement of a Highlandtown row home. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss out on an adventure or fascinating story from history. Steve Paterakis founded H&S Bakery with his partner and son-in-law, Harry Sakalas, in 1943. In the beginning, H&S was a 2-man, 1-woman operation, with Steve baking the bread, Harry running deliveries, and Steve's daughter Liberty keeping the books. Even as the business grew, it remained a family affair, as Steve's son John joined his father to work the brick ovens. He eventually inherited the company after Steve passed away. John Paterakis proved to be a savvy businessman, growing H&S Bakery into a multi-million-dollar company over the course of his life. Early on, he expanded into the wholesale market, determining it to be more lucrative than local retail. A key moment came in 1965, when he met Ray Kroc, and with little more than a handshake, struck a deal to provide hamburger buns to Kroc's young fast food chain, McDonald's. It would be the first of many such deals. Today, H&S Bakery provides bread to thousands of restaurants, including Popeyes and Olive Garden, hundreds of supermarkets like Giant and Whole Foods, and 90% of Maryland schools. John quickly pivoted his success into politics, becoming one of Baltimore's biggest movers and shakers. Over the years, he donated to both Democrat and Republican candidates alike, eventually earning him the nickname the Bread King. Rather than meet with various politicians, mayors, and police commissioners in his office, John would set up meetings in Broadway Market, around the corner from H&S's relocated headquarters on Bond Street. Thus, in his own way, John Paderakis continued the long tradition of using the market as a center for civic affairs. But Broadway Market was so much more to John than simply a backdrop for his various dealings. Nearly every morning before heading to work, he would eat his breakfast here, and on Sundays, he'd take his grandsons, Alex and Eric, out to lunch here as well. Like so many residents of Fells Point, the market was the central hub around which the wheels of their lives turned. No one could have ever predicted the success of H&S Bakery, not even John himself, who, on more than one occasion, referred to himself as a little Greek baker who got lucky. However, as lucky as John may have been, in the 1960s, Broadway Market appeared cursed. A fire in 1969 tore through the north shed, damaging the second story beyond repair. During the reconstruction, it was decided that the second story would be removed entirely, as it no longer served the civic functions it once did. These fires could not have come at a worse time. Since the 1950s, new megastores called supermarkets had been threatening the very existence of smaller neighborhood markets the country over. Part of the decision to downsize the Broadway Market following the fires was due to the changing shopping habits and waning customer interest. However, even as Broadway Market suffered through disasters and economic hardship, it remained an important public institution, providing opportunity for residents and homes for their businesses. One such resident was George Sedekis, who arrived in Baltimore in 1966, along with his 4 brothers and 1 sister. Orphaned at a young age, George and his brothers went to work early, joining the merchant marines and sailing on ships bound out of Greece. For years, they traveled around the world, exploring exotic and faraway places, including the United States of America. While docked in New York, George's older brother Nick jumped ship, determined to make a life for himself in this new country. He traveled south to Baltimore, where he met with family members already living in Greektown. George and 4 of his other siblings followed Nick soon after. For years, they worked various odd jobs in painting, construction, and restaurants to make ends meet. But by 1973, George had saved enough money to open his first restaurant in the South Shed at Broadway Market, a traditional Greek pastry shop called Akropole. While the venture only lasted a few years before shutting down, it provided George with invaluable business experience that he would funnel into a new project.
Driving up Boston Street, it's impossible to miss the bow of the Captain James restaurant, jutting out into the sky just like the ships that inspired the restaurant's iconic design. It's a unique departure from a fairly uniform brick building surrounding it, adding a bit of visual zest to the landscape. However, in 1979, it was a little more than just a gas station on the corner of Alisana and Boston Street.
By pooling their resources, George and his brothers were able to lease the property and soon turned it into one of the city's most beloved restaurants. Over the years, the Sedekis family has further transformed this little corner of Baltimore waterfront, purchasing new property as the business expanded and eventually opening a second restaurant, the Captain James Crab House, right across the street. Yet, even as both Captain James and H&S Bakery thrived, Fells Point and Broadway Market were in decline. The 1980s were a period of swift and unprecedented change for Fells Point. After winning the road fight of the 1960s and 70s, the neighborhood was suddenly open to private development. What followed was a surge of gentrification as developers brought up old warehouses and factories, converting them into boutique stores and upscale apartments. A Florida-based developer trying to cash in on the real estate rush began a land grab around Broadway Market, buying up shops and then leaving them vacant, therefore forcing out other businesses as customer traffic dropped. Their intention was to buy up the entire area and bulldoze it in order to build a series of luxury townhomes. However, what the developer didn't realize was that an urban renewal plan issued by the city prevented them from doing this. They found out too late and were forced to scrap their plans. As they scrambled to come up with a solution, the store sat empty, slowly deteriorating and becoming a blight on Broadway. The entire neighborhood seemed to be on a downward spiral, one that lasted for nearly 2 decades. Plans to renovate Broadway Market began in 2005 after local developer David Holmes purchased 40 of the surrounding properties. His hope was to reawaken the area's dormant potential by transforming Broadway into a neighborhood gateway. However, almost immediately, the project ran into roadblocks. Serious disagreements emerged between developers and the community, dragging out the discussion for months. By far, one of the most contentious topics was the demolition of dozens of historic buildings around Fells Point. Unfortunately, despite organized efforts to prevent such a scheme, bulldozers rolled into the neighborhood in the spring of 2007. Yet, just a year later, a global economic crisis did what residents could not. The Great Recession halted all development plans indefinitely. Suddenly, homes couldn't secure financing, construction stopped, and buildings in the middle of renovation became unsightly scars on the street. Holmes wrote the project off as a loss, and development groups from other cities began showing interest. A Boston firm eventually committed to a plan called the Marketplace at Fells Point. Initially, the development was meant to include Broadway Market, but this was later dropped due to lack of financing. While the Marketplace at Fells Point helped revitalize the area, following a period of significant economic downturn, it effectively left the market to fend for itself. As a consequence, the North Shed closed in 2011, and its remaining tenants relocated to the South Shed. This dark, empty building soon started to drag down surrounding businesses. With each passing year, it fell further into disrepair, becoming a black hole right in the middle of what should be a lively commercial district. The North Shed would remain vacant until 2019, when a new hope emerged. Talk to Bill Sedekis, and you'll get a sense that his family was fated to have a role in the revitalization of Broadway Market. In the South Shed, where his father's Greek bakery once stood, now he runs Chop Tank, an authentic Maryland crab house dedicated to all things Old Line. His experience in managing Captain James, still owned and operated by the Sedekis family, has uniquely prepared him for the role and given him a deep sense of the historical importance of the space he works in. Much of the original building remains intact, from the wood ceiling beams to the cast iron columns and stained glass. It's a project that began when Bill made a phone call to Alex Smith, the owner of Atlas Restaurant Group and grandson of the Bread King himself, John Paderakis. As luck would have it, Alex had recently been tapped by Baltimore City to help with the redevelopment of Broadway Market. Their plan was to use the Atlas Back restaurant as a launch pad through which they could acquire a loan to renovate the North Shed. The plan worked, and a hyper-local design team was assembled to get started on the remodel. What they produced is a look that blends historic architecture with modern style, providing an updated home for longtime tenants like Vicky's Deli, Sophia's Place, and Sal & Son Seafood, who were finally able to move back to the North Shed after being relocated.
Visit today and you can still find the original market stall numbers carved into street curbs, still hear the swirl of languages just as patrons in the 19th century would have, and if you look out over the harbor, you can still see the same waters that first carried 2 Greek immigrant families to these shores. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the history of Baltimore's Broadway Market. Before you go, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. I'm Evan, and I'll see you on the next adventure.